Okay. Well, first of all, good evening, everybody, and it's a real pleasure being black in your country, and I love you, wonderful policeman. Thank you. I first met Keith Moon, I think, in the Speakeasy, which was the club we all tended to frequent after a horrible drive back down from the north, or a horrible drive up from the south. After we'd finished gigs, we'd all rave ourselves nuts in the dear old Speakeasy, and I think that's where I met Keith. Can't remember the first gig we did with them. We played in America once or twice. This is Bonzo Dog and The Who, which was great, great fun. The nature of it was lunacy, madness. In fact, on the way up here, I just popped into a bookies, which is something I like to do, and there was a horse running called Barking Mad. And I thought, in honor of Keith, I must back it, and the bloody thing won by 6 lengths. That was quite wonderful. But it was madness. Keith and I never talked about music. We talked a little about film, mainly because he would wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was staying with him, and I'd be kind of still drunk. And I'd come to, and there'd be a Marx Brothers film showing in the bedroom. He would have crept around and got this bloody projector going. I mean, an old-fashioned projector, none of your bloody videos. And I'd be coming around with a girl next to me, and be, what the fuck is happening? And there'd be a night at the opera going full blast. But it was wonderful. So it was always, what shall we do now, dear boy? Where shall we go? What fun can we have? It was just beautiful. And we had many wonderful adventures. A week in the West Country where we drove his pink Bentley into some amazing situations. Trouser ripping in Marks and Spencer's and destroying drum kits in little clubs in the West Country. We'd arrive at these clubs at night and they'd realize it was Keith, and the drummer would just sort of shit himself, think, my God, it's Mooney. He's actually in this club. And he'd say, would you play, Keith? Would you do a couple of numbers? And Keith said, oh, of course I can on the bloody. And so Keith would sit into a kind of mediocre West Country band. And with 8 bars in, most of the skins would have gone through. And they go, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it, it's fine, it's fine. And of course, out came the cash box, our chauffeur driver. was paying the guy off. It was great, it was wonderful. So really, we didn't particularly talk about girls that much. Although we were naughty boys on occasion. It was mainly just madness. What could we get away with? What would society take? How much would they tolerate ripping trousers apart in Marks and Spencer's? Going into pubs. I would walk into a pub and the driver would have, I'd go into a pub and order a large brandy and soda. Good morning, large brandy and soda, please. And Keith in the car park would have his boot, a smoke capsule, sellotaped to his boot by Neil, the driver. And he would light it. So I'd be in the bar sort of humming and hawing. And a minute later, Keith would come in. Good morning, hello, how are you? How imagine the children? Wonderful, thank you. And of course, the governor, another large brandy, please, and said, by this time, the smoke capsule would just be beginning to flare up. And in about 2 minutes, the whole fucking pub was completely whited out with this smoke. And we'd just be carrying on at the bar talking. This is wonderful stuff. Sometimes we'd be thrown out, brutally thrown out, but other times the governor would say, what are you having, lads? It's just great to see you. For Christ's sake, there was a time in New York in a hotel room, and Keith was asleep. They'd all got in very late that night. Keith was asleep in his room. And Keith was suddenly woken up. This is absolutely true, by a New York construction worker with the sort of a Village People type construction guy. Muscly, beefy, shirt, hard hat. Where was this guy? He was in Keith's bathroom washing his hands. This guy had taken a plank from the building site and just pushed it across to this room. He had no idea who the hell was in the room. He wasn't some manic fan. But this fucker moved this plank over and obviously went across like this into Keith's room, into his washroom, into his ensuite bathroom, and was washing the guy. You know, I mean, cleanliness is a wonderful thing, but Keith was so outraged by this. He actually had some dynamite on him at the time, and he blew the bathroom up. And Townsend was 2 stories down, or floors. And Townsend heard this fucking boom, and Pete told me, do you know what I did? I just got out of bed and started packing. I knew it was Keith, and I knew we'd be thrown out. And sure enough, it was Keith, obviously, and they had to leave the bloody hotel. But that's outrageous, wonderful stuff. He just, he had no fear. Keith had no fear. He would, but then there's this huge contrast with him. He was the most gentle of guys. If we'd all gone into a pub, he wouldn't be sitting on his hands. Keith would be the first up. What are we having, guys? And it wasn't just, look at me, I'm wonderful. I'm Keith Moon, I'm getting a drink. He was just a very genuine gentleman, in every sense of the word. He was a great guy, always brought around, as I just said, soft, mellow. He was very, very, very tender. Then, something would kick in, and he would do anything, absolutely anything that he wanted to do, but not in a horrible, angry, malicious way. It would always be for fun, the fun side of things. And we just had so much fun. We ripped trousers in half, as you do in Marks and Spencer's. And then Keith and I, we'd just been to stay with Robert Stigwood, and we were drunk, hungover. It was somehow 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Robert had a place up in, I don't know, Harrow, North London somewhere, some big mansion. And Keith and I were on our way home, and we saw a mother care shop. And we thought, I know, let's go in here and do something naughty in mother care. So Keith and I went in, and we found a sort of little baby's knitted woolen suit. And Keith and I ripped this little garment in half, just as we'd done the trousers in Plymouth. And mothers and pregnant mothers all burst into tears and were screaming. Kids were running around. And Keith and I just sort of rudely stomped off, got back into the car and started driving. About 5 minutes later, the cops stopped us. And to prove my point, how we weren't arrested, because we'd left mother care in some kind of chaos. I am called away.
Have you got to...
Keith, I told you never to call me here. Can't talk. Bye. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Dixon of Dock Green will be back next week at the usual time of 7:30. Bye-bye.